Hi, welcome to the Hisfic Chickie podcast. This is DK Marley, the Hisfic Chickie, and today's episode is a very special author interview since my guest is one of the administrators of my group, the Historical Fiction Club, on Facebook. She is an invaluable asset to the group, and I value her help she has given to me and to the group, especially during some very trying times for me in dealing with my grief. So, with that said, please give a warm welcome to Chrystyna Lucyk-Berger, author of the Tyrol series of books, including one I just reviewed, The Girl from the Mountains. Actually, in starting out this episode, I'm letting you, Chrystyna, open it up with the story of your book and why you chose this topic to write about.
Well, this is probably one of the better known stories. I have a whole article about how I ended up writing this series about South Tyrol. It was a trip. Most of my stories come from inspirations during my travels, and I really love uncovering the lesser known stories. But this particular experience took place in 2002. I was invited to go down by car from Austria to Italy for an opera. It was Verdi's Aida, and I think that's right. I might be wrong there. I'm pretty sure. No, Nabucco. I'm sorry. We went to go see Nabucco. And anyway, so south of Innsbruck, there's a pass. It's called the Reschen Pass. And after we got over this pass, you see this amazing lake. It's just huge. I learned later on that it's like 4 miles long. 4 miles long, nestled between the peaks. And if you remember snow cones, this blueberry syrup color. That's what the water was like. It was amazing. And these mountains were amazing. There were beautiful pastures and meadows full of flowers and, alpine peaks and castles everywhere.
Oh,
and
sounds beautiful.
Beautiful church steeples everywhere. And we cross over into Italy, and I'm expecting that there's going to be something Italian, and, there's a pizza place on the border and blah, blah, blah. But everything was still in German and Italian, which I thought was, okay, interesting.
Yeah.
But then we went down towards the lake, and all of a sudden, out of the right-hand side, we're going through Graun Coron Venosta, but on the right-hand side is the lake. And off the shore of the lake, there is a 15th century church steeple sticking out of the water. And
wow.
My jaw dropped.
Yeah.
How does that even happen?
Right.
And it wasn't until much, much later that I found out that the valley had been flooded. It's a reservoir. And there were actually 7 hamlets and villages, actually 2 towns and 5 hamlets that had been affected by the flood. And there goes my sense of morality and my sense of injustice. Mm-hmm. And as soon as something like that happens, I'm on it. It took me over 5 years to research the information because there was nothing in English. So that was another thing that, propelled me to get this story out there. I thought, we don't know about this.
Right.
People travel through there. They take photos next to this church and they have no idea how amazingly tragic this story was. It's the same aspect as when you go to Dachau and take photos of yourself. People's lives were lost. People's lives were they were entire, hundreds of families that were displaced because of this.
Oh, wow.
And the deeper I got into the research, and now you guys have to keep in mind, I had to do research in Italian and in German, and neither one of those languages was, something that I was flourishing at. So, and this is long before Google Translator and DeepL.com and everything else. So it took me this one took me years to research. I ended up finding a professor at Innsbruck who had written the story about South Tyrol and what had happened after World War I. So South Tyrol was annexed by Italy after World War I. And they began a program of oppression against the German-speaking population, and not just the German-speaking population, but the Ladins. There was an Italianization program put in. And I tell you, the more I started reading about what had happened in South Tyrol, the more politically corrupt the information became, or was the revelation was there, that it was truly, truly morally and politically corrupt. It was just insane.
Oh, wow. That's
So I
amazing.
ended up choosing fictitious characters that would drive this story. And I feel like this was work that I really was meant to do. This is where I got serious about historical fiction writing, where I got serious about revealing history through story, where I got serious about being an author.
That's really incredible. And you can tell that your passion, in the book that I read, The Girl from the Mountain, the passion that you have about these stories is amazing. So you kind of referred to your research. So can you give us a little bit more insight about the research you did and how long you spent in the researching? I know you said 5 years, but what about in general?
Research for me is now very limited, because what I do is I research as I go, and I've actually used my niece as a research assistant. So I would shoot off some emails to her, things like, were there doorbells on apartment buildings in Lviv, Ukraine in 1941? And if not, what's my alternative? I needed her to find a pub where it's kind of got a basement atmosphere. And that's been around since at least 1941. So these kinds of things I do as I'm writing, because I've realized that as I'm writing, so many more questions come up.
Yeah, for sure.
So basically what I do is I research first to kind of develop my timeline and to understand what the major historical aspects are going to be in my book. And then I ask myself, how are my characters going to be affected by those events? And are they affected by those events? Because if they're not, then it doesn't go in. And this is, I think, probably where I've become strongest. It used to be that I researched and researched and researched nonstop, and I had such an overwhelming amount of information that I had no idea where to start.
Yeah.
And I think I'm no longer info dumping. I'm definitely much better at doing character-driven stories now than I was much earlier in my career. And so basically now I'm able to get that framework, that timeline, and then as I'm writing, I figure out what I still need to look up and also to confirm whether I'm in the right place at the right time when something was happening. And if not, and it's crucial to my story, then I put it into my author notes and I say, this is where I took my fictional license. There are certain times when I have to compress events, where I have to make things happen that are not, especially my big long saga, things that did not happen at the time that I'm actually, or at the point where I am in the story. And I will explain that in the author's notes to make sure that people understand that sometimes these things are there for the purpose of propelling the story forward, or to explain why my characters are doing something at the moment.
Yeah, that's your research techniques are very evident in your books, and I like that you mentioned that you did character-driven stories. That is so obvious, and for anybody that reads her books, you will definitely tell that. So tell me, Chrystyna, what was your hardest scene to write?
My hardest scenes, I think, are always endings. Making sure that it's, that everything is wrapped up, that all the threads are nicely packaged. I'm really good at writing endings for short stories. I love pulling the ending back around to the front of the story, so there's always some sort of echo. My mother told me when I was really young, she said I write like O. Henry, and I like that. I hadn't read O. Henry back then, but I like the idea because that O is exactly what I aim for. But with a novel, it's a little bit different. So difficult scenes would be those endings. And then there's always difficult scenes to write in every single book I've written. I would say maybe right now with my current WIP, which is the World War II Ukraine novel, I've worked on that front end. The first 7 chapters, I had to rewrite, I think, 7 times.
Wow.
I ended up tossing the entire front end at one point.
I
Because I
understand
realized that
that.
by the time I was done going through all the things that I had built in, I had a novel in itself in just the first 7 chapters. So
Oh, wow.
it just wasn't working, and I ended
Yeah.
up tossing that. But that, I can say that was probably a big time. Can I say this? No, I'm not going to say it. That one made the sweat on my brow break out.
Oh,
That
wow.
front end of the book. But I think we've got it now.
That's good. That's great. So, what do you think you owe the real people upon whom you base your characters?
Well, this question is emotionally tough. I don't even know if I can answer this without crying. See, I told you I was emotional.
Oh, yeah.
So
It's okay.
like I said, my first book that I ever tried writing, or my first novel that I ever tried writing, it is a book, but it's not a novel, was a depiction of my family's journey from World War II Ukraine to America. And I was studying journalism at the time. And so I took to interviewing my relatives and their stories. And I am so grateful to how they opened up to me. My family's quite large. If you want to picture my family, just think my big fat Greek wedding.
Oh, wow.
That is my family.
I love
Bunch
that movie.
of Ukrainians, and yeah, and a lot of them, lots of them, and they're all loud, and they all have their opinions, and nobody can communicate. I think that's one of the reasons I became a communications coach. I was trying to save my family, but anyway, yeah. The fact that these people opened up to me, because what they did was, through when I had eventually written and composed, it turned out to be a very good source for the rest of the family to understand what their older or their elders experienced in coming to the U.S. And that is a gift that you just can't put a value on, is for people to share their stories. So I'm very grateful to my relatives and my family.
That's really incredible. What a legacy to give to your family, and for them to share that with you. I can see where that's a very emotional question. So, in talking about the ethics, about writing about historical figures, and there's lots of opinions, but what do you think about that? What do you think are the ethics of writing about historical figures?
Oh, I just had this in my blog. I'm not comfortable with it. I'm not comfortable with taking real historical figures and writing about them. But I did do it in the Reschen Valley Series because I had a specific senator who was really crucial and key to the whole Italianization program in South Tyrol. And I have him appear as a cameo, but he never really speaks a lot. So what I do, if I'm going to use an actual historical figure, and I can take this specifically for example for Galazzo, I don't even know how to pronounce his name, Ciano. This is Era Mussolini's husband. He was the foreign minister under Mussolini, and he visited the Reschen Valley, which is where he appears in my Reschen Valley series, is in Two Fatherlands. I actually had his diaries. So because I had his diaries, I was able to kind of pull what his reaction was to seeing the valley and how it would be flooded. And that's what I used then for that aspect. Where I feel I've taken a huge risk is using Lenny Riefenstahn. She was Hitler's prize director during the Nazi regime, and she ends up being in my story quite a bit and interacts with my character Anna Marie Steinhauser, and that is where I took quite a bit of liberty. I studied everything that was about Lenny. I watched a documentary with her. I listened to her speaking, her manner, her tone, what other people's experiences had been with her. So I did study these things before I created her character. But because her character arc, her real life character arc, foreshadowed Anna Marie's character, and I had already planned Anna Marie's character arc, and to find Lenny and as the person that Anna Marie might have run into in Berlin, it was just perfect. It was just there wasn't a better choice. So, yeah, I chose to fictionalize her. I'm bracing myself to see how people react to that. I'm also playing with the idea of writing a novel. There's a lot of novels out there right now, for example, about Coco Chanel, about
there
Jackie
is.
Kennedy, there's just a lot of stuff going on. The Photographers series, I think that is Soraya and Lane. These kinds of, or Hemingway's Wives.
Yeah.
Those kinds of historical novels. I don't know if I want to tackle like this, but I am quite fascinated with one particular subject, and I'm seriously considering possibly doing her as my next novel, but we shall see. The reason that I'm hesitating is because I know that the relatives are still alive and quite active in government and politics, so I'm trying to figure out if there's an angle I can tackle, like what is it called? A unreliable narrator aspect. We'll see.
Oh, I am so intrigued. We are definitely going to have to talk after this recording. I'd love to know who you're talking about. But talking about historical figures and writing about them, I completely understand. In my latest work in progress, I had to deal with one of my characters being H.G. Wells, and doing research about him and learning things about him, as well as some of the other political figures of that around 1914. I was, needless to say, I was shocked at some of the things that I learned, and then trying to have to work them into the story. It's a challenge. It's quite a challenge. So, Chrystyna, let me ask you this. What is the most difficult part of your artistic process?
There was a really good meme once where, writing is 10% writing and 90% trying to explain how your character is buttering toast. DK, was that you who said that?
No, it wasn't me.
Or maybe it was Hannah Byron. I think it was Hannah Byron.
It was great, though.
Yeah, 10% of my day is getting down the right words, and the 90% is trying to figure out how to move my character from one corner to the other corner of the room without using the same darned words that I've used 1,000 million times already in the novel. Shrugging, winking, all of these things. I think that's the most difficult, is keeping it original. When I'm writing, it's like I have a camera in my head, and so the first draft that I have is almost always loads of body language, loads of how they're walking, how they're talking, how they're sitting, and sometimes really, really complicated, but just so that I can remember how I picture this happening, and then going back to it and making it so that it flows and that people are just, caught up into this image that I have built, without noticing. I think that's the most complicated process right there.
That's so great. And, maybe you should try playwriting sometime, because it sounds like with that camera in your head, you make a really good director or screenwriter or playwright or something like that. But we love you sticking with the novels. We love that. So, Chrystyna, if you could tell your younger self anything, what would it be?
My younger writing self. If I could tell that younger writing self anything, I would tell her, just stick with it this time. Don't give up. Don't give up. I had about a 10-year break that I actually told myself, no, actually there were 2 breaks, 2 long breaks where I stopped writing because I had given up. I just didn't think I was good enough. And I found my way back each time. And thank goodness, because the experiences that I had in between, I feel have made me a stronger writer, have made me a stronger person, period. And has added a lot of layers of experiences and variety, things that I can still draw on and pull on into my current novels. I also feel that sometimes you can be too young for certain topics. I think I tackled my debut novel when I was way, way, way too young. I have an interesting story about how I tried to understand my characters and the duress that they were under during World War II. I actually traveled alone throughout Europe and followed the pathways of my family and put myself into situations that were high risk just so that I could feel fear, just so that I could experience a semblance of the disorientation, the chaos, the fear is really key here. And I put myself through it, but I was still too young. I was still too young to really understand it. And I think with my life's experiences, with the difficulties that I had to traverse, I mean, I moved to a country where I didn't speak the language. I built up my own business. This is not without, hurdles. And those are the things that gave me confidence, that gave me the strength to tackle writing again, to face my demons and say, no, you can do this. This is all you have ever wanted to do, Chrystyna. Now sit down and do it. And I'm really glad I did that. But I would tell my younger self that to not despair, to not despair.
I very much agree with that. And you're talking about experiences. I can really relate to that. And again, I'm not going to start crying, but experience is a great teacher. I'll never forget one of my favorite movies is Shadowlands. And whenever Joy Gresham says that to him about that, she felt like that experience was everything. And that experience, teaches you things. That is so true. And a younger person, they may approach it from a different standpoint, especially in this modern age. They're so inundated with knowledge and technology. But the maturity that comes with experience is invaluable, and it definitely helps you develop your stories in a different way than when you were younger. And to not give up, we're really glad that you didn't give up. And thank you very much for that. So let me ask you this. What do you think are common traps for aspiring writers, especially younger writers?
The most common trap for aspiring writers, I feel, is, and maybe I'll just take it from the historical fiction aspect, is info dumping, is not trusting that your reader will be drawn in with your characters. I made this mistake so many times, and I wrote an entire book like this, just info dumping without end. I now use it as my research book for future novels about World War II Ukraine, actually. So it wasn't a bad exercise, but it was a badly written book, my very first one. But I would say info dumping is one for historical fiction, and for in general, for aspiring writers, I think the biggest trap is to believe that that you're going to write the first bestseller. My God, no.
Oh, no.
This is, authoring is about, it's comparable to national sports or professional sports. You can be really, really good at something, but until a scout comes and discovers you and signs you up for a contract, no, it's a hit or miss situation. You have to work really, really hard, and then you have to put yourself out there. You have to put yourself out there, and you better put on your Panzer suit, because people will criticize what you do no matter what. Even if you think it's the best book ever, even if you have 1,000 5-star reviews, somebody will criticize it.
For sure.
I laugh now. I find some of my 1-star reviews to be actually quite hilarious. But if you don't put yourself out there, if you don't risk it, if you're always looking for perfection, that scout that you're hoping that will find you will never find you.
And, I like that you said that, because I can remember in a writer's retreat I went to, and they talked about that, your book is your baby, and you better be prepared for somebody to tell you that you have an ugly baby. So the 1-star reviews are definitely sometimes really funny, but they can also be, really helpful in helping you develop and become a better writer. So about the book reviews, do you read your book reviews? I know you said you did, but maybe you can kind of expound on that a little bit about reading your book reviews, and how do you deal with bad ones or good ones?
I read all of my book reviews, all of them. And I hope I don't scare anybody off by saying that. Because I love them. I want to know what people think. It's like I said from the very beginning, I really look for critique, I want to know, how can I improve? I want to know what is working, what's not working. I get 1-star reviews. They hurt. They really do. Like, I'm thinking, wow, really? But if there's a critique in there, and I wish people would stop just with the ratings and just tell me what it was that they didn't like about the book, because maybe I can avoid it next time, Yeah. But anyway, I read them all, and I love the 5-star reviews. It's really funny though, because I almost feel dissatisfied when somebody is just gushing about the book, because I'm always looking to see what could I have done better. So yeah, there's 4-star reviews, the 3-star reviews. That's where I'm really looking for information. 1-star reviews with no information, for me, is just trolling. Not really. I mean, you can just say you didn't like the book. That's fine. But it would be really helpful, especially for me. It's not every author who wants this, but for me, I want to know why it didn't work for you. That does not mean that I'm going to change the way that I write completely. I can learn from it, but I don't expect that every book I write, or any book that I write, is going to resonate with every single reader. That is not the point. I'm looking for really constructive criticism that will make me into a better author.
Well, I had to gush over your book. I thought it was amazing. I had just gotten finished watching that movie, A Hidden Life, and it just, I don't know, just the way you describe the scenery, the conversations, the setting, it just immersed me, and I just thought it was brilliant the way you did it, and I'm looking forward to reading your other books. I've got them all on my to-read list, so that will be coming up. But let me ask you this. What was an early experience where you learned that language had power? I really love this question, because I've thought about it a lot, so I would love to know how you learned that language had power.
And I have been honoring you all my life. So Sharon Davis assigned our 2nd grade class for Halloween. She assigned a ghost story. We were supposed to write ghost stories. I was right at this moment, I was really into ghost stories. We lived in an old house, and actually my first money ever made telling stories was I used to give ghost tours through our house for 25 cents. But anyway, so I came to school, and you have to imagine, I don't know, like 24 kids are sitting on the floor. Everybody's restless, and the kids come up and they've got their sheet of paper, and they had approximately 6 or 7 sentences, and nobody's listening. Everybody's giggling, passing notes. And of course, the child is reading from his page, and his face is down, and yeah. And then Sharon Davis called me up, and I had a stack, I think it was 7 pages. Because I didn't just have one story. I had a story for every room in our house, which I had actually plagiarized from other books that I had been reading. So basically I put in the ghosts that I had been reading about into our house, which, so my first story was plagiarized. Anyway, so I'm reading, and then as I'm reading, I realized something is completely and totally wrong. And when I looked up from my page, everybody's eyes were on me. Everybody. And Sharon Davis's look, I will never forget the look of pride on that woman's face. I just saw emotions rippling over her. And I thought, I've got 23 people looking at me and paying attention. And that, my dear, that was the day I felt the power. And I said, this is what I want to do.
I just got chills. You just gave me chills, Chrystyna. That is so amazing. So we're going to kind of switch up a little bit. Oh, I still have chills. We're going to switch up a little bit, and I would love to know what literary pilgrimages you have gone on.
I think the first real literary pilgrimage I ever had was when I took a master's writing course at the University of Minnesota. I was a senior working on my bachelor's at that time and was invited to take part in kind of an introductory course. They were trying to find people who would be interested in signing up for their master's program. And it was a writing course, so I was really interested in taking it. And I was in there with a class of masters, and wow, yeah, I was very intimidated. And one of the things that the professor did was she said that we're going to have to read a lot, because that's what writers do. We read a lot. And she asked us to bring a list of 10 books that we would recommend for reading. And so I come with a list with Stephen King and, I don't know, Dean Koontz maybe, but commercial literature, commercial things. And I didn't know at that time that commercial was, the big C word. But that course opened up my eyes. So they ended up choosing one of my, even though they all scoffed, the students all scoffed, but the professor said, no, Chrystyna has an absolute valid point here. We need to study the ones who are making money and selling so many books. We should perhaps study what it is that they're doing right. But through that course, I discovered Gabriel Garcia Marquez, and I discovered Alice Walker and Toni Morrison, and it was my real first introduction to literature, and I was blown away, just blown away. I learned a lot from those books, and I learned a lot from that course, but that's another story.
Well, we'd love for you to tell us more about that story. Maybe we can do another interview really soon. So I'm going to switch back up, and we're going to go back to talking about things that make us cry. And I would love to know, what is the first book that made you cry?
I don't remember the first book that made me cry.
Oh, okay.
Although maybe it was Charlotte's Web. I'm a very emotional person anyway, so like you can get me to cry on a drop of a hat. I'm the one who's always crying during movies.
That's okay.
Anything that tears at my emotions. So I definitely remember crying at Charlotte's Web, for sure. And then The Trumpeter Swan. I don't think I cried with Judy Blume, but definitely Charlotte's Web.
Well, Chrystyna, we have really enjoyed you being here today, and I'd like for you to leave us with your favorite quote, something that tells us a bit about you and why.
Sometimes you got to do the things that you don't want to do in order to get to the things that you do want to do. I told myself that. I think it's going to be about 20 years ago now. I talked about the fact that I had made, that I broke away from writing. I was an editor because I thought my writing isn't good enough, so I'll tell others how to write. So I was a magazine editor. I was going to be a veterinarian. I worked in retail. I worked in the restaurant business just to make money so I could travel. And from those travels, I always kept diaries. I would write stories. I was always interested in the people who lived in the places that I traveled to and what their stories were. I remember a trip to Alaska I made by car with me and my dog and I. My dog was kind of a wolf husky mix. That was a fantastic trip. And I was sitting at a restaurant in the middle of somewhere in Alaska, who knows, and this guy just walks right up to me, stands over the table, and he says, can I have a can I sit down with you? And I thought, sure. And I ended up, he started telling me stories for the next 2.5, 3 hours. I couldn't write fast enough.
Wow, that's
and it
amazing.
was so fantastic. Just these stories were hilarious. I was laughing so hard. And I didn't care if they were all true or not. It didn't matter. I was thoroughly entertained for the next 2.5, 3 hours. So I did all of these different things. And like I said before, I honestly believe that is what makes me a strong writer now. Stronger person, period. Is that I put myself out there. I did what I had to do to get to the things that I really wanted to be doing. And now I'm there. I'm doing what I really want to do.
And we are so glad you are doing what you do. I want to thank you, Chrystyna, for joining my podcast today. Your forthright answers are very thought-provoking, and I think will give the listeners and your fans an in-depth look into you as an author. Thank you to everyone who joined the Hisfic Chickie today or downloaded this episode. Please go to my blog at www.hisficchickie.com to review the transcript for this episode and to get the link to Chrystyna's books on Amazon. Or you can go to Amazon and search for her book, The Girl from the Mountains. She also has a new release scheduled for April 13th that you can now pre-order with one click, titled To Fatherlands, which is part of the Reschen Valley Series. I think I said earlier that these were the Tyrol series, but it is the Reschen Valley Series, of which there are 4 in the series. Both Chrystyna and I had the incredible fortune to collaborate with the amazing actor and narrator John C. Dixon on our audiobook versions, hers being Souvenirs from Kiev and The Smuggler from Reschen Pass. If you haven't heard his amazing voice stylings in bringing characters to life, check out her audible versions of these books. Souvenirs from Kiev was also awarded second place in the 2014 H&S International Short Story Award, and the collection won the silver medal in the IPPY Book Awards 2020 for military and wartime fiction. Once again, thank you, Chrystyna, for a fabulous interview, and we wish you continued success in your writing life. This is DK Marley, hoping you have had a great day, and see you next time on the Hisfic Chickie podcast.